Here are some of Secretary Mayorkas' effective results. Approximately 10 million illegal border crossers from over 160 countries have invaded the United States since President Biden took office and Secretary Mayorkas started his job. Do you believe that Secretary Mayorkas' actions and refusal to enforce the laws warrant impeachment?
Absolutely, Congresswoman.
He has failed to perform and is culpably inefficient, yes.
The Secretary is acting in violation of the law and constitutional order.
Thank you very much. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
You want to talk policy? Let's talk policy. I agree we have problems at the border. Let's talk about how we can solve them. But instead of actually going over to the Senate, this committee, which has the committee of jurisdiction over border policy that is being negotiated right now by a bipartisan group in the Senate with Secretary Mayorkas, instead of actually engaging in those substantive negotiations to reach some sort of a bipartisan agreement to address the problems, we are sitting here with a charade of a sham impeachment hearing with expert impeachment witnesses who are Republican officials, political officials suing the Department of Homeland Security. Another hearing. It's the same hearing we've had 10, 12 times. Same pig, different lipstick, because we're now going to call it an impeachment hearing. I find it really difficult to sit here listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle slander personally a cabinet secretary who has committed much of his life to this government and our public service. He was a U.S. attorney. He's worked multiple stints in the Department of Homeland Security. And you're certainly welcome to disagree with how he executes his job. You're welcome to criticize him. You're welcome to make the case to the American people as to why Secretary Mayorkas, in executing President Joe Biden's immigration policy, should be removed from office at the ballot box. But to come in here over and over and over again and to personally attack and slander without any evidence a cabinet secretary who has committed so much of his life to this country, who himself comes from a Cuban family escaping difficult circumstances in his country, who is an immigrant family himself. You should be ashamed of yourself. It's enough. So who do we have here? And I am sure all three of you are excellent attorneys general. But I have never heard your names mentioned in the category of Mr. Bowman, who is a legal expert on impeachment. And as far as I can tell, none of your states actually are on the border. So I don't understand why we are sitting here in a, quote, impeachment hearing with three attorneys general from different states who are Republican officials and have absolutely no expertise on impeachment. The reason is because the last time the Republicans did that and they brought in their so-called experts on impeachment for the first and only oversight public hearing, they were embarrassed because their own experts acknowledged that there is insufficient evidence to impeach President Biden. So who do we have here? We have attorneys general who are suing Secretary Mayorkas and the government to stop him from implementing his policy to address the issues at the border. That's right. So one rule that the department has implemented was the asylum processing rule, which would allow asylum officers, rather than immigration courts, to decide asylum applications for those placed in expedited removal to significantly expedite the process. That might reduce the backlog. That might create a disincentive to come. That's something that Secretary Mayorkas did to address the border. No, you sued him to stop him from doing that. How about the circumvention rule? Or that is the circumvention, excuse me. How about the asylum circumvention rule, which says that you have to either appear at a port of entry or have first sought asylum from a neighboring country? That would reduce the people who could apply for asylum. No, you sued them You sued them to stop them from doing that. And how about trying to address the parole decisions to allow some people to come in and be able to actually have work authorizations so that they are not just sitting on the dole? No, you sued them. So this is what we have. We have Republicans suing Secretary Mayorkas to stop him from implementing his policy to address the issues of the border. And now we're going to impeach him because you say he's not addressing the issues at the border. Which do you want? I yield back.
I want to thank the attorneys general for participating today. Thank you for your service to your states. I was a prosecutor before coming to Congress. I missed that job. My father was a cop. My brothers are cops. And it seems like we've got a pretty educated group of attorneys general here. Mr. Knudsen, you went to Montana Law School, right?
Yes, Representative.
Great. Pretty good law school. Mr. Bailey, University of Missouri, is that right?
Yes.
And you served our country after September 11 as well.
Yes.
Thank you for doing that. Mr. Drummond, you went to Georgetown, is that right?
I did.
That's a good school. I was rejected there twice for law school and then as a transfer. That's a very good school. I just want to level set where we all are on what's a crime, what's not a crime, because the three of you have offered testimony to my Republican colleagues about what is an impeachable offense. And I just want to go down the list here of some of the potential impeachable offenses that we've seen in the history of the Congress. Bribery, Mr. Knudsen, would you agree that's an impeachable offense?
I would, Congressman.
Mr. Drummond, would you agree bribery is an impeachable offense?
I would.
And Mr. Bailey, would you agree bribery is an impeachable offense?
Yes.
Same as extortion, Mr. Knudsen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummond, extortion?
Yes.
Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
How about obstruction of justice? Would you agree that that's an impeachable offense, Mr. Knudsen?
If there was a conviction, yes.
Okay. Mr. Drummond?
Yes.
And Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
How about inciting violence against police officers? What would you say, Mr. Knudsen?
Again, if there was a conviction of a criminal offense, I think that would certainly rise to the level.
And Mr. Drummond, how about incitement of violence?
Yes.
And Mr. Bailey, incitement of violence?
Would need more facts to make that legal determination. I think that's bereft of sufficient facts.
And Mr. Knudsen, I just want to drill down a little bit because you said if there was a conviction. So are you saying that Mr. Mayorkas should be convicted criminally before he could be impeached?
Congressman, no. I'm simply speaking to your example of would inciting violence against a police officer rise to the level of an impeachable offense. My testimony was if there was a conviction for that crime, then yes.
Okay. And obstruction of justice, you said the same thing, right?
Correct.
But you think for Mr. Mayorkas, he does not need a conviction to be impeached?
Well, as this body has done in its past, I think there's certainly precedent. No, I do not believe there has to be a criminal offense. High crimes and misdemeanors, as it was understood by the founders, as it was understood in the English common law, does not necessarily mean there has to be an actual crime committed.
In the summer of 2019, former President Donald Trump used $300 million of taxpayer dollars to ask President Zelensky of Ukraine to get dirt on his potential primary political opponent, Joe Biden, and he was impeached in the House for that. Should he have been impeached for that, Mr. Knudsen?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Representative, I'm not a member of this Congress. I'm not privy to all of that information. I certainly haven't seen a lot of those reports. This body chose to go forward with those proceedings, as is its purview.
Mr. Drummond?
It's outside my lane. I'm
Okay.
just a simple attorney general from Oklahoma.
Mr. Bailey?
I believe President Trump was acquitted of all charges, and that's beyond the purview of my testimony today.
On January 6th, he incited and aimed a violent mob at the Capitol. 6 police officers would later lose their lives. 1 lost a finger, 1 lost an eye. The president was impeached. 10 Republicans voted for that impeachment. Mr. Knudsen, should he have been impeached for that? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, he was.
Okay. Mr. Drummond?
He was impeached for that.
And should he have been?
I don't have an opinion on that issue.
Okay. Mr. Bailey, what do you think about that?
He was acquitted of those charges.
Okay. So what's interesting to me, and again, I respect that you all are here, is that when you've testified to Mr. Mayorkas' conduct and you believe pretty clearly that he can be impeached for his conduct, but when we go through pretty egregious conduct of using taxpayer dollars, of inciting and aiming a mob, having the greatest attack ever on this Congress, this Capitol, our Constitution. You don't want to comment on it at all. And I think what we're really seeing from the majority in all of this is that they're not interested in finding any solution on the border. In fact, what we have seen is that there's a 2014 deal in the Senate, bipartisan. They walked away when they were in the majority. Speaker Johnson has said that he will refuse any additional funding for the border. And now we have witnesses who, again, want to comment only on Mayorkas, but don't want to comment on President Trump. Mr. Chairman, respectfully, I just see a party that does not want to fix, but only wants the fiction. And with that, I'll yield back.
Just want to reiterate that. I think it's been said this very many times today by our colleagues here on the House side, on the Democratic side, that we all know that this impeachment inquiry, this effort to try to impeach the secretary is a complete political stunt and sham, and I just want to reiterate that. We all know it's a political ploy that's not grounded in the facts, truth, and has been conjured up for just one simple purpose, and that's to score cheap political points against the Biden administration. We also know that we've had articles from the New York Times and other publications just really laying out that this is all about this pursuit of impeaching Mayorkas. It's about this kind of effort that's been started, quite frankly, by even a member of this committee for many, many, many months. That's all just really about hurting the president. Now, Professor Bowman, Republican leaders have been quoted promising donors that they would impeach Secretary Mayorkas in fundraisers back in April of 2023. Do you believe that this committee has uncovered any evidence of high crimes or misdemeanors since that time?
Not that I'm aware of.
And thank you. And let's be clear. What we're moving ahead with today is because extremists, including some folks that are in this committee, have demanded it over and over again. Now, I want to give a couple of quotes from some members of the House. Congressman Andy Biggs told Newsmax that Republicans, quote, have nothing to campaign on. And he said that he was embarrassed by this. Now, Congressman Chip Roy has said, and I want to quote, I want my Republican colleagues to give me one thing, one that I can go to campaign on to say that we did. Just one, end quote. And in fact, this last Monday, he went on TV to call the Republican conference, and I quote, a continued failure theater, end quote. So I understand that we're trying to throw red meat to an extremist base, but we're wasting the public's time, and we know that the Senate will laugh off all of these charges. And let's remember the bigger picture. Some of my friends on the other side of the aisle don't want to really govern. They're not serious about solutions that could actually become law. And they're obstructing $14 billion in emergency supplemental funding. They voted against hiring hundreds of additional Border Patrol agents and of ports of entry, and have opposed the incredible resources that we've been trying to send around technology, supporting organizations on the ground, support for Border Patrol agents, and many other types of funding. And I also want to remind the committee and the public that President Biden, on his first day in office, sent a comprehensive immigration plan to Congress, which Republicans have refused to act on. I also want to note that Secretary Mayorkas has continued to try to negotiate a bipartisan, sensible, and humane approach to actually fixing our immigration system and trying to actually address the issues that remain along the border. Because Democrats agree there are issues and challenges along the border, and we want to see those fixed. You know, as an immigrant myself, I've always believed this is a nation of immigrants. We should never forget that this country was based on so much hard work and labor of immigrants that now live all across this country. And our immigration system won't be fixed by this impeachment process, and it certainly won't be fixed by their proposal, which is H.R. 2. And let's set the record straight about H.R. 2. The bill would end Health and Human Services funding for legal representation of unaccompanied children in immigration proceedings. It would essentially send children to detention camps, and the bill subjects all unaccompanied children to an accelerated removal process, as we know, in horrible conditions at these facilities that we have seen over the last few years. And quite frankly, we know this is not just not a solution, but it's inhumane and cruel to demonize some of the most vulnerable people that are coming to our country. We want to address the root causes of migration. We want to ensure that legal pathways are followed. We want to make sure that folks receive the support they need back in their home countries. And we certainly don't want to defund organizations like Catholic Charities that would rip away aid to communities and to migrants across our country and along our border. The idea that our border problems, which have needed a bipartisan solution for decades, would be solved by H.R. 2 is just not true. It's an anti-immigrant policy, and we should reject it. Thank you, and I yield back.